Jacquemus just opened their first USA store. It's in New York, in Soho. Now, this is very interesting because it feels like it wasn't that long ago that we were talking about Jacquemus being so smart financially, Jacquemus being really good at marketing, and also just the business of Jacquemus being something that a lot of designers and brands should look to because it's still an independent brand. And there are so few independent brands that have been able to make the amount of money that Jacquemus has made. They have made an absolute killing. And an article I really wanted to go through in this stream is this article here in Vogue Business, because here they kind of talk about some of the figures that Jacquemus has been able to achieve. And I honestly think it's very, very impressive. Once again, thinking of the fact that, Jacquemus is an independent brand. Here it says Jacquemus revenue surpassed 200 million euros in 2022, up from approximately 100 million euros in 2021, the brand said last year. It generated around 280 million euros in 2023, according to estimates by Jan Kretz, a principal at consulting firm Laurent Berger. So it's insane. Like an independent brand making 280 million euros in 2023 is absolute insanity. And so when I saw that he was opening a store in the US and opening a store in New York, I thought it's only right. They're in that position financially. It's a brand that is expanding very quickly, even though it's independent. And I guess it works. However, there is a big conversation being had, and this started from Miss Tweed saying that actually Jacquemus is struggling to finance the store. And it seems like it's a situation where, you know how these stores happen, you sign the leases a lot earlier before you plan to launch. And it could be that they signed the lease a bit prematurely, and now they're kind of forced into having to have the store. So let's read what is available on Miss Tweed, and then we can read some other articles about this whole situation happening. But it says, Jacquemus hires Rothschild & Co. to find a minority investor. Jacquemus has retained Rothschild & Co. to help it find a minority investor willing to finance its ambitious store opening plans and expensive celebrity-peppered shows and events. Several senior industry sources with first-hand knowledge of the matter said, until last year, Jacquemus was regarded as one of France's most prominent success stories. It's been hit by the luxury spending downturn, particularly online, where it makes a significant portion of its sales. Turnover this year is expected to be down 15 to 20%, industry insiders say. So that's very interesting because, of course, Jacquemus is very, very, very successful financially. That I don't think that's in question. However, when brands make money, it's revenue. We have no idea what the profit margins actually look like at Jacquemus because they spend a lot of marketing. The shows are extremely extravagant. I can't even imagine how expensive some of the Jacquemus runway shows are. And just the celebrities that they work with, the influencers that they use. So we don't know what the overheads are. We don't know what the figures look like. We don't know what the profit margins are. But clearly, they need some sort of money. They're kind of strapped for cash if they're looking for minority investors to start to help them fund this store opening in New York. And so I just found it really interesting because a lot of people online and the discourse online has been, Jacquemus is struggling. Jacquemus is going to have loads of issues. Now, I don't think it's that bad, but I do think normally when a brand is independent and they've been able to be so successful, this is the point in which you're going to start thinking about getting investors because now things are going on the downward spiral and you might not be able to have the cash to weather the storm when you have, like they said in the Miss Tweed post, they're looking at a 15 to 20% downturn for this year compared to last year. And considering how brands normally work is they expand as the revenue goes up. So as the revenue goes up, they hire more staff so that then they can be in more markets and they can produce more stuff so they can sell more. So when you lose 20, 15% in 1 year, it hits you very heavily financially because now you have way more overheads than you did before, way more staff, but not as much revenue, so you can't pay for things. And that's why I think that this might be a sign that Jacquemus might be seeking investors very, very soon. I can very, very much see, let's say 2-3 years from now, we're going to be like, oh, L'Oreal has invested, or the Wertheimers have invested into Jacquemus or LVMH or Kering or whoever, OTB. I can see very, very soon an investment taking place, because this is normally what I see when these kind of things happen. But let's go and read a really good article. It's in Fashion United, which is a platform I love reading, because I think in Fashion United, they have almost every single fashion news story first. It's really strange. I don't know how they pump out like 20 plus articles a day, but they somehow manage to do that. But essentially, this article reads, as growth momentum fades, is Jacquemus seeking investment? And of course, they're really just talking about the fact that Miss Tweed has reported that they're looking for minority investors, and the fact that they've faced leadership changes. Here they've mentioned that they had a departure of their chief executive, Bastien Daguzan, in the late 2023. So of course there are issues there. And normally when you see a restructuring on the senior level, you know that there are issues happening. He says, I agree, he has probably reached his ceiling, may even have exceeded it with full independence. And that's the thing, because it's amazing to be independent. And I think it comes down to what your goals are. And I always say this when it comes to brands. Are you content being a multiple $100 million brand, which Jacquemus definitely is, because I mean, 280 million euros is a lot of money. But, do you want to grow even further than that? Are you pushing for the billions? If you are pushing for the billions, you cannot be independent. You have to, at some point, have the infrastructure of a massive conglomerate like an LVMH, like a Kering, because you just don't have the infrastructure, and you just can't take advantage of the profit margins the same way that massive conglomerates do. Because massive conglomerates, and I talk about this all the time, they damn near have a monopoly on the whole industry. They just control everything. They want to make a fragrance. Everyone is going to give them favorable raw material prices, because LVMH, buys so, like, in terms of volume, they buy so much raw materials that as a company, well, if I give Jacquemus a very good price, then I might be able to sell to all the other LVMH brands. So it's a long-term play, so they're going to give you a good price. Same thing with Kering. And that's down to everything. Factory prices, fabric costs, the economies of scale are insane. And so if you want to keep growing to that level, you have to seek investment at some point. You can't just be independent. And I wonder what that means in terms of the way Jacquemus operates, because normally a lot of brands, these big wigs and these corporate heads, they come in and they just mess up the brands and they turn it to commercial. And these brands start to become a far cry from what we associate from the brands, and kind of the identity of the brands are just completely lost. And that sometimes is a very, very big issue. So I guess we'll just have to wait and see how this plays out. But I thought it was really crazy, because to me, it makes all the sense in the world for Jacquemus to have a New York store. But it's just crazy that there are all these financial issues tied into it. Yeah, Rachel says the economies of scale. Yeah, like conglomerates, they control everything. It's so insane. It's so insane. Which is why I always find it weird when, an up-and-coming brand charges the same as, let's say, Gucci. And people are like, why do you think you can charge that? Like, Gucci's a luxury brand, you're a new brand. And I'm like, you're probably getting a better product from a smaller brand because of economies of scale. The main reason why it's that expensive is because they've spent so much money buying raw materials for everything, because they can't buy in bulk the same way an LVMH would, or the same way a Kering would in this case, because we're talking about Gucci. It's interesting. A lot of people don't actually understand like how economies of scale it works and how important it is. This is also a very good point. If the row have investors now, Jacquemus most definitely will have them too. Yeah, it's only a matter of time before that happens, it seems. Leo says, I think the fashion bubble grew exponentially, especially with online retailers also growing. So some brands having a decline in sales isn't as worrying as people think. Yeah, and I also think that we've seen this across, this is a very great point, Leo, by the way. We've seen this across every single conglomerate. LVMH have had their issues. Even in BOF, there was that article where they were talking about the fact that LVMH has to rethink their idea of luxury and how they're going to promote their brands moving forward. The main reason why a lot of these brands are struggling, especially the brands under conglomerates like Kering and LVMH, is China. Because a lot of Chinese consumers were traveling to Japan because the yen right now is kind of weak. So they were traveling to Japan and shopping. But now, because of some of the effects of COVID and so many other things happening in China that's affecting the economy, people don't really have the same disposable income, which means less consumers are going to Japan to buy stuff and less consumers are buying stuff in China. So that's not really like it's not going to be an issue forever. It's more of like a short-term thing than, oh my God, everyone needs to be like worried. I think Kering needs to be worried more so than LVMH, because Kering was like, their performance was really bad. So many of their brands were at a loss, like not at a loss, but making less money than they have in the past. Kering just issued its third profit warning in a row yesterday. It's looking very peak for Sabato. Yeah, the performance of Kering, I'm going to talk about that in the next stream when we talk about what's trending. We're going to look deeper into the financial reports. But yeah, I was looking at it yesterday. It's not looking good for Kering at all, as I think the luxury conglomerates are going to have to sell off some stuff. Maybe. I feel like Jacquemus is the type of brand that is going to be gutted by any conglomerate. Probably, because if we think of what sells as Jacquemus, is very much the bags. And that's what conglomerates like. But the problem with it is Jacquemus is more of a lifestyle to me. When I think of the lifestyle, I think south of France. I think of cafes in Saint-Tropez by water. It's very much a lifestyle thing. But when sometimes these conglomerates get involved, they just weed out any personality out of a brand. So I hope that if the inevitable happens and he has investors, that they don't just come in and, absolutely destroy what the brand represents or what the brand stands for. This YouTube channel runs on your support. If you want to support the channel, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll gain access to exclusive content that includes everything from my Patreon podcast, where I give a behind-the-scenes insight into the fashion industry, as well as a fashion book club, where I review my favorite fashion books. You can also check out my fashion ebook, which highlights the best fashion journalists to follow, definitions of common fashion terminology, and how to determine what a good source of fashion information is. The links to everything are in the description below.